June 12, 1942. A submarine bearing German markings glides toward the coast of Long Island under full darkness. 4 men climb into a raft. They carry boxes of explosives, tens of thousands of dollars in American cash, and a list of targets that the German High Command had decided would cripple the United States war effort in a single summer. The men are not soldiers. They are German-born civilians who had lived in America for years, who speak English without an accent, and who know exactly how the country they are about to attack is put together. Their list has 9 targets. Near the top, a railroad curve in the mountains of central Pennsylvania. American Ironworks covers the engineering decisions and institutional battles that built this country's industrial spine. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And before we get into this, what do you know about Horseshoe Curve? Drop it in the comments. A lot of what gets said about this place is wrong. The German intelligence agency that planned this operation knew something that most Americans did not know then and do not know now. The entire Eastern War production of the United States, every tank, every artillery shell, every shipment of steel heading to the ports at Baltimore and Philadelphia moved through a single choke point in the Allegheny Mountains, 5 miles west of a Pennsylvania railroad town called Altoona. One curve, 2,375 feet of bent track, climbing at a 1.8% grade through the mountain. Destroy it, and the Eastern industrial supply chain stops. The operation was called Pastorius, named after Francis Daniel Pastorius, the German-born Quaker who founded Pennsylvania's first permanent German settlement back in 1683. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, the head of German military intelligence, chose that name personally. In 1942, approximately 8,700 freight cars passed through the rail junction at nearby Galitzin every single day. Trains were rounding Horseshoe Curve at an average of 1 every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That cadence was not peacetime traffic. American railroads carried over 90% of all military freight during the Second World War, and 98% of all military personnel. Everything moving from the steel mills of Pittsburgh and the coal fields of central Pennsylvania toward the eastern ports had to climb the Allegheny Mountains first. The Horseshoe Curve was the only continuous grade route over that summit. Destroy it, and you do not slow the American war machine. You stop it at the mountain. The Germans did not need a spy to find out the curve was load-bearing for the American war effort. Life magazine had already published a feature on it. The men who planned Operation Pastorius read American trade press. They knew exactly what they were targeting and exactly why. Armed soldiers were stationed along the curve by the time the saboteurs landed. The Pennsylvania Railroad knew what it had. What nobody inside that intelligence operation knew, what the German command could not have anticipated, was that the entire plan would collapse, not because of military intelligence, not because of perimeter security, but because one of the 8 saboteurs lost his nerve on a Long Island beach and walked into an FBI field office to confess. George John Dash, the leader of the Long Island group, turned himself in within days of landing. The FBI arrested all 8 men. A military tribunal found them guilty on August 1st, 1942. 2 days later, 6 of them were executed in the electric chair at the District of Columbia jail. Dash received a 30-year sentence for his cooperation. The Horseshoe Curve had been the primary target of the most serious act of foreign sabotage ever planned on American soil. It survived because one man got cold feet. That is the narrow margin by which the most strategically important railroad structure in the United States made it through the Second World War. And here is the piece of that story that gets no attention at all. The locomotive that will cross that curve for the first time in history this July was built in the same month the saboteurs were still in training. December 1941. Big Boy. Number 4014 rolled out of the American Locomotive Company plant in Schenectady, New York, and was delivered to Union Pacific in Omaha, Nebraska. It has not been east of the Mississippi River since the day it left the factory. 84 years later, it is coming back. To understand why that crossing matters, you have to understand what the curve actually is and what it costs to build it. Because this is not a story about a railroad landmark. It is a story about a race, an engineer who decided to run the company rather than argue with it, and 400 men from Ireland who cut a mountain apart with picks and shovels to make a deadline that the continent's industrial future depended on. By 1846, Pennsylvania was losing a war it had not officially declared. Baltimore had the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, pushing west toward Pittsburgh. New York had the Erie Canal and a rail network moving freight faster than anything Pennsylvania could match. Philadelphia was the eastern seaboard's second largest port, and it was watching commerce drain north and south, while the Allegheny Mountains sat between it and the interior of the continent like a locked door. The Pennsylvania legislature chartered the Pennsylvania Railroad on April 13, 1846. Not because of a vision for American transportation, but because the Baltimore and Ohio's charter contained a clause, it would become void if the Pennsylvania Railroad was built first. The race to Pittsburgh was literal. The railroad hired John Edgar Thomson as its first chief engineer in 1847, at a salary of $5,000 a year. Thomson was 39 years old. He had already built the longest railroad in the world at the time, 173 miles from Augusta to Atlanta for the Georgia Railroad, and he understood something about mountain grades that most railroad men of his era did not. The state's own engineers had already surveyed a route over the Alleghenies. It ran 84 miles west from Lewistown along the ridgeline, holding a maximum grade of 0.852% the whole way. Safe, predictable, technically sufficient. Thomson rejected it. The state engineers had optimized for the mountain crossing. Thomson optimized for the whole route. His calculation ran like this: follow the Juniata River on the long approach west of Harrisburg, hold the gentle riverside grade for most of the distance, then solve the mountain in one concentrated section just west of Altoona. Yes, the mountain section would be steeper, 1.8% grade instead of 0.852. But the total construction cost across the full route would be lower, because following the river meant less earthwork on the long flat sections where the freight volume would actually accumulate. The harder mountain crossing was the cheaper solution. The institution did not see it that way. Thomson's funding was blocked by the Pennsylvania state government and by the railroad's own board of directors. He had been hired to build a route, not to choose one, and the men writing the checks wanted the safer gradient. Thomson did not argue. In 1852, he ran for the presidency of the Pennsylvania Railroad, ousted the incumbent board, and assumed control of the company he had been hired to serve. Then he raised $3 million in bonds, approved his own route, and broke ground on the mountain section the same year. Construction on the Horseshoe Curve began in 1851 and lasted 3 years. The workforce was roughly 400 Irish immigrants, most of them recruited from Counties Cork, Mayo, and Antrim. Between 1845 and 1855, more than 1.5 million Irish adults and children had come to America to escape the potato famine. They were desperately poor, they were willing to work, and they had the kind of physical experience from mine labor in Ireland that the mountain required. Thomson hired them from camps set up along the route. They were paid in cash. Not one of their names appears in the permanent historical record of the Horseshoe Curve. What they built, using nothing but picks, shovels, black powder, mules, and handcarts, was this. They shaved the face of the Allegheny Mountains, filled in 2 deep ravines on either side of Kittanning Point, and laid 2,375 feet of curved track through the resulting ledge at a grade tight enough for a locomotive to hold without a runaway, and consistent enough to carry unlimited tonnage without special equipment. The west side of the arc sits 23 feet higher than the east side. The whole structure required no tunneling. It required no steel framework. It required no machinery that did not already exist in 1851. The Horseshoe Curve opened for regular traffic on February 15, 1854. The Harrisburg newspaper recorded the moment. The time between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh is thus reduced to 15 hours, and with the improvement, a reduction in the fare has taken place. Before the curve, the trip took 4 days by portage rail, a complicated system of canal boats, horse-drawn cars, and 10 rope-operated inclined planes that required 54 employees, 12 stationary steam engines, and 12 horse teams to move a single boat section over the summit. The curve replaced all of that with a single continuous grade. By around 1930, the Pennsylvania Railroad claimed its trains carried more freight over the Allegheny Mountains in one day than the old Allegheny Portage Railroad had carried in an entire year. The curve was listed among the 8 engineering wonders of the world alongside the Panama Canal and the Empire State Building. That designation has since been revised off the official lists. The structure itself has not needed revision. Thomson's alignment has not changed since 1854. The only modifications to the Horseshoe Curve in 172 years were additions: a third track in 1898, a fourth in 1900, an observation park in 1879 that became the first purpose-built train-watching site in the United States. The fourth track was built while the third was still carrying freight trains at 35 miles per hour through the work site. Workers blasted additional rock from the outside face of the curve while live trains ran 12 feet away. Which brings us to the second layer of the Thomson calculation, the one that does not appear on the first page of any search result about Horseshoe Curve, and the one that explains why the German military considered a railroad curve in Blair County, Pennsylvania, worth crossing the Atlantic to destroy. Thomson did not just build a better mountain crossing. When he became president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, he converted the entire locomotive fleet from wood fuel to coal. Every other railroad in the country eventually followed. The problem with that decision, if you are a competitor of the Pennsylvania Railroad, is that the Pennsylvania Railroad now carried the coal that every other railroad needed to run. All of it moved east through the Allegheny Mountains. All of it crossed the Horseshoe Curve. Thomson built the bottleneck. He then manufactured the demand for the bottleneck's cargo. And then he ran the railroad that hauled that cargo through the bottleneck he had designed. By 1942, the Altoona Works, the Pennsylvania Railroad's shop complex in the valley below the curve, was the largest railroad maintenance facility in the world. 218 acres, 125 buildings, 16,500 workers at peak employment. The city of Altoona itself did not exist before the railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad established it in 1849 as a maintenance base. By 1930, Altoona had 82,000 residents, almost all of them employed directly or indirectly by the Pennsylvania Railroad. When the German High Command put together the list of American targets that would do the most damage to Allied war production, they did not choose Horseshoe Curve arbitrarily. They chose it because it was the structural answer to the question, where does American industrial output become American military power? The answer was a curved mile of track in the Allegheny Mountains, built by immigrants with hand tools, designed by an engineer who had to take over the company to get it funded, running at one train every 15 minutes through the middle of the Second World War. That number, one train every 15 minutes, means something specific. A freight train of the period ran approximately a quarter mile in length. At peak wartime capacity at any given moment, there was always a train either ascending or descending the curve. The track never went cold, which is the detail that makes Operation Pastorius genuinely terrifying in retrospect. It is not that the saboteurs came close to destroying the curve. It is that no one in the German intelligence apparatus considered the possibility that the plan would fail. They built it around the assumption that 8 men with explosives could shut down the American war machine for long enough to matter. That assumption was not unreasonable. It was defeated by one man's decision on a beach in Long Island for reasons that remain partially unclear even now. Which one surprises you more, that the plan was that close to execution, or that one defection was enough to collapse it entirely? Drop that in the comments. On July 11th, 2026, at 9:30 in the morning, Union Pacific Big Boy number 4014 will pull up the grade out of Altoona, round the bend at Kittanning Point, and cross the Horseshoe Curve for the first time. No locomotive of its size has ever done this. No locomotive of its size is likely to do this again. The big boy is 133 feet long and weighs 1.2 million pounds. Its frame is articulated. 2 sets of 8 driving wheels are joined at a pivot point that allows the locomotive to negotiate curves that would derail a rigid frame of that length. The articulated design was the engineering solution to a specific problem. Union Pacific needed a locomotive that could haul a 3,600-ton freight train over the Wasatch Mountains in Utah without a helper locomotive. The only way to generate that much tractive effort, 135,375 pounds, without building something too rigid for mountain curves, was to build 2 engines and hinge them together at the center. The result is a machine that is, functionally, 2 powerful locomotives sharing 1 boiler. What railfans call the Big Boy, the engineers who built it called the Wasatch Class. The name Big Boy came from a worker at the Alco plant in Schenectady who chalked the words on the side of the first unit's smokebox in 1941. Nobody erased it. Number 4014 was built in December 1941 and delivered to Omaha the following month. It spent its entire working life, 20 years of regular service, on the corridor between Ogden, Utah, and Cheyenne, Wyoming. It retired in 1961. Union Pacific restored it to operating condition in 2019. Since restoration, it has run exclusively on Union Pacific's Western network, the territory it was built for. The 2026 Coast to Coast Tour is the first time number 4014 has operated east of Chicago. Getting it to the Horseshoe Curve required a federal regulatory waiver. Norfolk Southern's eastern trackage requires cab signal equipment under federal law, and the Big Boy does not have it, not because it lacks modern safety systems, but because Union Pacific equipped it with something newer. In 2021, number 4014 became the first mainline steam locomotive in history to carry positive train control, the collision avoidance system mandated by Congress after the 2008 Chatsworth crash. The locomotive is more technologically advanced than the requirement it cannot satisfy. Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern filed a waiver petition with the Federal Railroad Administration in February 2026. The waiver was granted. Union Pacific's steam team, led by Ed Dickens, physically measured clearances at every bridge, tunnel, and platform along the eastern route in early 2026. Photographs posted to the Union Pacific Steam Shop Club showed team members with measuring equipment in tunnels and along platform edges, verifying by hand that a 133-foot machine built for Utah could fit through infrastructure designed for Pennsylvania. Tickets for the July 11th Horseshoe Curve crossing sold out within 4 hours of going on sale. About 2,000 people will stand inside the bowl of the curve to watch it happen. Joseph DeFrancesco, the executive director of the Railroaders Memorial Museum and the Horseshoe Curve National Historic Landmark, put it plainly: an engine this size has never traveled on the curve, and it is doubtful it will again. The curve itself is still in active service. Norfolk Southern runs approximately 51 freight trains through it every day. As of 2012, 111 million tons of freight crossed it annually. The Pennsylvania Railroad is gone, Penn Central is gone, Conrail is gone. The Altoona Works has gone from 16,500 workers to roughly 1,000. The city that the railroad built has been contracting for 60 years. The curve is still running at capacity. Thomson's alignment, the one the institution refused to fund, the one he had to take over the company to build, the one 400 unnamed Irishmen cut out of the Allegheny Mountains by hand, carries 111 million tons a year, 172 years after it opened, on trackage owned by a company that did not exist when he designed it. The structure outlasted every organization that ever operated it. It outlasted the attack planned to destroy it. And on July 11th, 2026, the locomotive built in the same month the German saboteurs were still preparing their operation will climb the grade out of Altoona, cross through Kittanning Point, and make the transit that no machine of its kind has ever made. Whether that is a footnote or a conclusion depends on what you think the curve actually represents. It was built to win a commercial war. It was guarded to survive a shooting war. It has outlasted every institution that depended on it. The machine crossing it in July was built for a different mountain, in a different war, by different engineers, and it has never been here before. If that is the kind of story American Ironworks covers, subscribe. There is more where this came from.